Hey everyone. Today is our day 16. We are going to finish up our electricity unit both today and then on Monday and Tuesday of next week. And then Wednesday is kind of our last day. So that's exciting. Next week, I will be releasing more information about what the end of the semester is going to look like. However, I just want to let you know that it won't be very difficult for you. And also, that I'm going to try to at least build in 1 to maybe 2 days where you can sort of catch up on any missing assignments. Okay? So, yeah, more information to come. We'll talk about it. All right, so let's talk about today's assignment. So I'm first just going to outline the assignment for you, and then after that, we can look at this. So I enjoyed reading your Would You Rather questions so much because they were fun, and you guys have fun ideas, that I decided to go ahead and go for another one. So I picked two. You can pick whichever one you want to answer. Again, if you want to skip this, like if this isn't your thing, that's fine. You can just do the assignment. I'm going to count you present if you just do the assignment, or even if you start the assignment. But the questions I thought are just something kind of fun, and there's something that you can do in under 5 minutes in case you need to, make sure that your absences and presences are good. But maybe cut back on doing things until later when you have more time. So answer one of these two questions. Which would you rather have or do in the comments below? You can answer them in your private comments or in the class comments, but I'm just gonna let you know it's more fun if you answer in the class comments. You know that there are a few people in your class that you've just been waiting for their response because you forgot how much a goofball they were. And this is their time. This is your time. You can do it. Also, so today's topic is for a couple of different reasons. Number one, we're finishing up the year, and so I thought it would be cool if we did something that I found interesting, and I'm just going to hope that maybe you think it's cool too. This was the most requested response when I asked what topics in electricity you want to learn about. Mondays and Tuesdays assignment will have to do with circuits and with simple household appliances. We can't really talk about how electricity in your house works, but we can talk about how your toaster oven or a hairdryer works. Okay? So let's go ahead and go through these. I'm so proud of this. It's beautiful. Alrighty. Welcome to the slides presentation. Take 2. There's only a few of them though, I promise. All right, so let's talk about what is this electricity in your body and how does that work? Now, I want you to know, you can just stop the video here, in which case, read the slides, go to the bottom, and your assignment is just to choose one of these 3 questions to answer in a complete response, please, and to post that response here in some manner. Then you just resubmit these slides. So that's what you should do for everyone to whom this might look like a familiar topic, or maybe, I don't know, you just don't want to listen to me, I guess. For everybody else, though, I'm going to go through these slides and explain what in the world is going on up there. So, number 1, when we talk about electricity in the body, what we're talking about is these electrical signals. Specifically, cells involved in your nervous system. They both conduct and transmit electrical signals. So these nerves all over your body, both in your brain and throughout your skeletal system, right? Using electric impulses to communicate with each other, to tell your different muscles that, hey, you need to go ahead and contract now. And one of those very, very important muscles is your heart. The heart has special cells just to receive an electrical impulse, and that's how it knows that it should beat. Anything that interferes with that electrical impulse is very, very bad. The other parts of your body that would be important to tell to keep contracting or not contracting would maybe be your diaphragm, the muscles underneath your lungs that tell your lungs to expand and contract. That's how you breathe. So these electrical signals are really just a form of communicating throughout the body. you should know this. Your body overall is electrically neutral. However, there's different charged ions called electrolytes. And some of them have positive charges because they lost electrons, and some of them have negative charges because they gained electrons. And these are moving throughout your body. You get them from all the different foods and, well, now, different drinks that we consume. But some of these charges, they aren't really spread over the body evenly. Some of them, some charged ions, are inside cell membranes, and some of them are outside of them. Anytime we talk about electricity in the body, we're not really talking about a current, right? There's not like something plugged into you that is supplying a steady current. Instead, though, there are these charges of those ions, of those electrolytes. Some of them, again, inside cells, some of them outside cells, and that creates a sort of electrical gradient. So a gradient is just any time we have something that's up here that's really, really high and something that's really, really low. And that eventually builds up potential as those two things get farther apart. So a real quick review of Ohm's law. Ohm's law is just those three things: voltage, current, and resistance. The voltage tells us, hey, there's a lot of charge building up on either sides of this cell, both on the inside and the outside. How much potential energy is there? That's the voltage. The current is just the flow of electricity from one point to the next. So when we talk about this in your body, the current is the flow of either those positive or negatively charged ions across the resistance of your cell's membranes. Remember, resistance is just anything that stops or just slows down an electrical current, usually some type of insulator. In this case, it's your membranes. And when we talk about biology, anything that's a really good insulator is just like a lot of fat. Keeps you warm, keeps you charged. It's important. The most important part of the body that uses this electrical signaling to communicate to all the other important parts of the body is the brain. Specifically, there's two types of brain cells. So there's neurons, which are the sort of like important actors, and then the glia cells, which are more like their little support assistants. Glia cells, by the way, are highly underrated. They deserve their own time to shine. But yeah, so here is the 2-second version of how a neuron works. I put in a really, really nice picture, but you don't have to know these things unless you plan on, doing anything in the medical industry. And then you will eventually have to learn it, but you should know. This is a specific AP bio or anatomy topic that is usually not covered in high school, to any extent. I just happen to really like it because this was my thing for a while. So, bringing it in. Okay, so neurons specifically. So neurons are going to receive information from their dendrites. Dendrites look like trees, and they come from the root word meaning trees. Dendrology is the study of trees. Dendrites look like trees. They send information down to their axons down here. How do they do that? So glad you asked this hypothetical question, viewers through the video. So that electrical current is going to stimulate these dendrites. It goes to the cell body, this nucleus here, and the nucleus is like, we have a problem. It says, pass that electrical signal on, please. So that electrical signal goes down the body of the axon. You see it's passing these myelin sheaths. These are essentially like little balls of fat that are kind of wrapped around the axon. They actually make it go way faster. So it's kind of cool, right? It looks just like a wire. You have a conductor on the inside and an insulator on the outside. Form mimics function. So after that electrical signal gets to your axons, who really cares? Every other part of your body does, for reasons. And that reason is this. That electrical signal tells your axons to release a nice little chemical cocktail in the form of a neurotransmitter. What's a neurotransmitter? I'm so glad you asked. Those are basically thousands of different types of chemicals, of which a few of them are pretty commonly used that we kind of talk about some, that control everything in your body, from your actual thoughts. Still not sure how that works, but it's because of neurotransmitters. Your emotions, those are actually really well linked. Your different behaviors, your physical responses in every sense and form, your memory, your ability to learn, your attention span, how afraid you are of things, how fast your heart beats in certain situations, if you have problems sleeping, basically everything. Neurotransmitters are complicated and cool and weird. And they're just sort of chemical signals that let your body know, hey, this is what's going on. All right, so what does this actually do inside of a cell? So just real quick, okay. So this synapse, I might include another picture here. I would like another picture, yeah. Basically, those charged particles that I talked about at the beginning, those ions, if a neuron is just hanging out and resting, then what's happening is there's negative ions, so more negative ions on the inside and more positive ones on the outside. This is typically sodium is on the outside. Potassium is on the inside. That's true. So those are both positive, but it's sort of overwhelmed by these chlorine atoms, which are mostly negative. So we have an environment where there's more negative on the inside and more positive on the outside. These charges want to be together, right? If there's anything we know from electricity, it's that opposite charges would like to get together. So think of them as just like the forbidden lovers. One of them is inside the cell, one is outside the cell. Are they ever going to meet? Who knows? In between these is like a gate that's called a sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump essentially functions like a bouncer. It tells them sometimes they can go inside and sometimes they cannot. Also, if you don't like this metaphor, then I don't know, comment with your own, okay? It's not the best one. So, all this imbalance is going on. But if there's another thing that we know, it's that nature really, really hates all forms of inequality, including every single gradient. So eventually you have all this charge building up on the outside, and sometimes two different things happen. Sometimes a neurotransmitter comes along and it says, hey, how are you keeping down true love? This is true love. Kind of like that guy in The Princess Bride. He just shouts about true love a lot. And so the neurotransmitter says, open the gates. And then the charges, they just flood in. Or the charge itself builds up so much. There's so much of a difference in voltage that eventually you get an electric current. Those gates open and those positive sodium ions flood in. And you have what's called the action potential. All of a sudden, everything is now the opposite. Where the cell used to be negative, it's now positive. And all of those sodium ions are now on the inside. So it's actually more negative outside. So you have this reverse of what things used to be. And eventually, that is an electrical signal. Not eventually, it is an electrical signal. And it's sent down to the bottom of the neuron, and it releases those neurotransmitters, and it tells everything else what to do. Yes, please. So, some neurotransmitters you might recognize. Again, there's like thousands of these chemicals, some of which are not yet identified, some of which do not have these nice, catchy names and are instead named how normal proteins are named, which is a bunch of garbage that I don't even want to repeat because it mostly just involves a bunch of letters and numbers. But yeah, so again, these are kind of also simplified things. Usually one or two neurotransmitters does more than one thing. But if you've heard of neurotransmitters before, you've probably heard of these 8, specifically serotonin, dopamine, and probably adrenaline. Those are usually pretty common. Speaking of, if I read one more article that's like, did you know that chocolate gives you the same chemical feeling as when you gamble. No kidding. They're both for pleasure. Everything linked to pleasure is linked to dopamine. It's just like what it is. It's not a surprise anymore. No one is surprised. Know this too, because sometimes people have a tendency to oversimplify these things. Everyone has their own mixture of levels of neurotransmitters of all different types that are what their body expects and is used to. So giving somebody or having too much of one of these neurotransmitters for one person is not the same as a second person. And all of these things sort of exist on a spectrum. If you have too much dopamine, like way, way too much, if you just flooded your system with dopamine, you wouldn't be just so happy that you would just float off the earth. Instead, you have symptoms of schizophrenia. If you receive almost no dopamine, then you start developing symptoms of Parkinson's because neurotransmitters are complicated and they do a lot of jobs, and simplifying them down to just like one simple feeling and just thinking that we can just fix everything if everyone just got like the exact right levels isn't how any of this works. So, sorry, this was my PSA. Okay, so these ions, what are they and what are they doing? An electrolyte is what these ions are called. An electrolyte's just any mineral that has an electric charge, either negative or positive. It includes things like sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, phosphate, and magnesium. It's usually responsible for several things. So number one, everything that crosses that potassium, that sodium-potassium pump that I just talked about, that's an electrolyte. It's responsible for all of that nervous system communication. It also helps you sort of keep your pH and your fluid levels in balance. Because your nervous cells send signals to your muscles and tell them when to move, there's some electrical signaling going on there. So they're responsible for a lot of your muscle contractions, and also responsible for your heartbeats, right? So this is why if you sweat too much, you sweat out a bunch of electrolytes and you immediately need to replenish them. This is why we sell things like Gatorade. This is why after a heavy workout, it's actually more useful to eat something with a little bit more salt in it, or to maybe drink something like a juice instead of just drinking straight water, because you're not replacing those electrolytes that you're using. If you don't have enough electrolytes, you can get things kind of simple like muscle cramps, or you might be a bit dehydrated. But extreme electrolyte loss can lead to things like issues with your heart, maybe skipping beats, maybe going into shock, and issues with your nervous system, like being confused or dazed or dizzy or even passing out. So all of these things are a balance. There's also, of course, issues if you have too much sodium or potassium or phosphate or magnesium, and all the rest of them, but more on that later. Alrighty, I know we all want to know, what happens then when you're electrocuted? I'm gonna let Hank Green just kind of take this one. All right. And finally, your assignment. Woohoo! I tried to think of applied questions that were not easily Googleable. I want to know what you guys think. How do you think this happens? What's going on there? So you just have to choose one question to answer, and yeah, explain it below. Actually, you should know this. I'm going to include a fourth question that I thought of right before I started this video. Again, though, you only have to pick one to choose from, and it's just whichever one you find the most interesting. So thank you guys for coming to the topic I've been most excited to talk about all semester that I had to deliver to my faceless computer. Bye-bye.